What's going on, guys? This is Ty with Team M Shot Fitness coming at you today with a video about nutrition. A little bit about me. I'm a certified personal trainer and weight management specialist, and I just want to talk about nutrition in general here. Kind of a basic video. Some of you may know all this stuff, so this video may not apply to you, but we might get a little bit in depth on certain topics, so it may be interesting to watch either way. First of all, I want to talk about macros. In the bodybuilding world, a lot of people, and this is just fitness and not even if you're a lifter, macronutrients are basically calories. And what happens is when you consume a food or a food label, there's different things that may be kind of confusing. First of all, I'm going to talk about macros, and these are the things, the nutrients that you consume that have a caloric value. So first of all, let's talk about carbohydrates. Carbohydrates have approximately 4 calories per gram. Then you got protein, the same thing, approximately 4 calories per gram. And then you got fat, approximately 9 calories per gram of fat. There's another macro too, and that's alcohol, approximately 7. So the reason I'm saying these approximation values is because it may vary by a couple, point so-and-so grams, but usually it's a good basis to value it at 4, 9, and 7. Proteins, carbs, fats, and then alcohol. So what I want to talk about first is carbohydrates. So this is important because you may implement or manipulate carbohydrates as you work out or train. Let's say post-workout, you may have a quick carb, and you don't really know why you're doing it, you just know that a lot of people are doing it. I'm going to explain why people do this. So as you consume a carbohydrate, it's going to take anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes to basically break down, and that's standalone. So that's not including other macronutrients that are combined with this. So let's say you're just having sugar, like let's say pixie sticks, or you're having, what I like to do is have a lemonade, which is just pure carbs. It's dextrose is usually the primary ingredient with that. And what happens is it takes anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes to empty from the stomach. It's called gastric emptying, guys. And what happens is the stomach is going to take this carbohydrate and it's going to make it into a liquid. It turns a solid to a liquid, kind of like a blender. Now, it's important to note that with carbohydrates as a standalone, there's a thing called the glycemic index. And what this originated from is comparing 50 grams of some food source to 50 grams of pure glucose, which is basically pure sugar, and how each of these broke down, the time frame, and then they created a comparison. Now, glycemic index is kind of out of the window if you're applying any other macronutrients to that at the same time. It kind of will deviate the glycemic index in the breakdown. It really doesn't apply. So don't focus so much on that. So anyway, let's say post-workout we're having that quick carb source. We're doing this to replenish glycogen, because as you exercise, you expend your glycogen. What glycogen is it's stored sugar. So a muscle cell, and it doesn't even have to be a muscle cell because there's other organs that store glycogen, such as the liver. But let's say this is a muscle cell, okay? The muscle cell is wrapped in fat. This fat protects. Every single cell in the body is wrapped in fat, guys. So fat is not the enemy. A lot of people like to demonize fat. Well, you have to have fat to live. If you didn't have fat, you're going to age a lot quicker, and you're going to be pretty unhealthy if you're cutting your fat down to 0. So what's going to happen here, guys, is this cell is wrapped in fat, and it's got these little things that are around the fat called enzymes. And enzymes let things in and let things out of the cell. What happens when we exercise is we have in here glycogen. Glycogen is stored sugar. So when you consume a carbohydrate, it stores as glycogen in the cell, which I will describe later. As we exercise, glycogen is used. So these enzymes, or should I say receptors, will release glycogen, and it will be used as energy. Carbohydrates are the primary and preferred source of energy for our bodies, guys. Keep that in mind as well. So what happens when our glycogen levels are depleted is a hormone called cortisol is released. And cortisol's job is to find energy in other functions such as muscle tissue, and that's not good for gains, right? So basically, when a carbohydrate is depleted, there's a process called gluconeogenesis in which there's a breakdown of glucose from other tissues. So that's why you see a lot of athletes consume a quick carbohydrate immediately post-workout to replenish glycogen. What this does, and when you consume a carbohydrate, imagine this is your artery. The artery is going to fill, as that carbohydrate is broken down and absorbed through the intestines, it's going to fill up with stored sugar in the bloodstream, which is glucose. Well, the bloodstream can't really store too much of this, and it's going to start to thicken. And so the body is going to utilize what it can to put this back into the cell. And so a hormone called insulin is secreted by the pancreas. And what insulin does is it's kind of like the keyhole to these receptors in the cell. So these receptors let back in stored sugar, glucose, and it's converted to stored sugar in the cell, which is called glycogen, guys. Basically big clumps of glucose together. So as this is stored, you then fill up with glycogen, you replenish that, so that your body is not immediately breaking down your muscle tissue, which is kind of important. Next, I'm going to talk about fat. And I'm going to leave protein for last. But fat is not the enemy. Usually the recommendations are that 30% or less of your dietary intake is fat. Now, there are 4 types of fats. There are polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, saturated, and then there's trans fats. Basically, you want to try to stay away from trans fats at all costs. Your diet should still consider saturated fats, but not to an excess. Usually the recommendations are going to be 10% of your caloric intake as saturated fats. The rest is mono and polyunsaturated fats. The reason why, guys, is because here's the artery again. What happens if you're consuming too many saturated or trans fats is these arterial walls are going to start to thicken and harden. And that's not good, right? Because if you're having a lot of glucose going through here or you're starting to exercise, these arteries are going to want to have contraction. Well, if they're inhibited by hardened artery walls, they're not going to be able to contract, thus leading to a possible cardiac emergency, such as a heart attack. So what poly and monounsaturated fats do is they soften and create elasticity in the arterial walls, thus allowing better ventricular contraction in that artery, right? So it's able to expand and close, and it's not inhibited. Where can you find these kind of poly and monounsaturated fats? Well, if you look online, you'll usually be able to find really good sources. I'll list a few that I personally throw in. I like to have almonds to get those healthy fats. Fish oil for those polyunsaturated fats. You can also look at things such as canola oil or virgin olive oil. The saturated fats, guys, are going to be mostly animal fats. So when you consume like a steak or eggs, that's mostly going to be saturated fat, if not all. So again, you're trying to limit the intake of those saturated fats, but fats are necessary and critical to grow human growth and human health. So I'm going to talk about protein next. Protein takes approximately 2 hours to break down. Fats, I'm going to go ahead back to fats, 3 to 5. So protein's 2 hours to break down, and that's standalone. So if you have like a protein shake, it's going to take approximately 2 hours to break down. Protein's very critical as well because protein then converts to amino acids, and amino acids are pivotal to your body's function. Skin, fingernails, hair. Protein builds muscle with those amino acids, so you always want to make sure that you're getting adequate protein intake. I personally, being a bodybuilder, I tend to have 30 to 35% of my calories as protein. And I try to mix up those different types. I'll have beef protein, protein from eggs, protein from dairy, and then I'll have other sources of protein like fish. And I kind of mix those up. So that's basically how macronutrients work and the basics for those. I'm going to quickly talk about micronutrients, which are also important in that spectrum. Let's talk about fiber. There's other micros such as vitamins and minerals that also play a role. But the main micro that I really focus on other than my macros is fiber, because fiber plays a very important role in health. And fiber will actually slow down that breakdown of carbohydrate. However, if you have too much fiber, what's going to happen is it's going to increase the digestion, thus basically diminishing the nutrient absorption in food. So general recommendations are 35 to 40 grams of fiber per day. I usually try to hit 35. And if you're having too much, so I'll give an example, a vegetarian sometimes may have up to 50 grams. You are also, like I said, diminishing the nutrient absorption in your food. So fiber helps to kind of lube up the digestive system, and it's very critical as well. So keep that in mind, guys. Get your proper macronutrients, your proteins, carbs, your fats, carbohydrates. If you're having it alone, you want to have maybe a complex carb that isn't going to immediately spike insulin, because what happens if your glucose turns then into glycogen and it's too full, that glucose is going to store as fat, and that's really what we're not wanting to do, right, if we're looking at health. So I hope my video was helpful. Focus on your macros, focus on your micros, and your healthy fats. And keep in mind that we're going to be uploading new videos. Subscribe to my channel if you like this video. Give it a thumbs up for me. And any questions, let me know. Thanks, guys.